Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. Welcome to Mastering On1 Photo RAW 2018. In this video, we're going to process a night image in On1 Photo RAW 2018. And I think this is the perfect image to process because there's so much wrong with it. I was invited to shoot from the tallest building in Buffalo, I believe it's called Seneca One Tower, from the roof. And although you can't really tell in the image, there's this huge ledge that goes all the way around the roof. And I guess so you just don't accidentally walk off the roof. This ledge came up to almost my chest. And it was very deep too. So it was like almost 4 feet thick. And it went all the way around the roof. And to shoot this image, I had to have my camera on a tripod, and I had the tripod as tall as it could go. So the camera was way up above my head. And I had the camera in live view, and I really couldn't see, or I didn't take care to make sure it was perfectly level. I got the edge of the ledge in the shot in the bottom of the image. And as you can see, it's very crooked. The exposure isn't perfect. So there's a lot of things wrong with the shot. It was shot with a Nikon D800E with a Nikon 24-70 f/2.8 lens. The exposure was 3 seconds at f8, ISO 400, and I believe I had the camera in timer mode. So I had the camera way up on that tripod and tried to frame the image frame the scene the best I can, and I hit the shutter button, and probably 5 seconds later it took this very crooked shot. So let's process it. We're going to head over to the develop module, and I think the first thing I'm going to do is straighten and crop it. I'm a little bit too wide. I have too much sky in the shot, and I have this ledge in the shot, and I want to get rid of that. So we're going to go over to the crop tool over here in the top left-hand corner. And as you can see, it's super crooked. So let's straighten that first. We'll go up here and we'll get the level tool. Because the horizon's in here, this will make it very easy to straighten. So I'm just going to draw a line right across the horizon with the level tool. Just something like that, and it just automatically straightened the image. Now I want to crop it, and I want to keep the 2:3 ratio that the original shot was taken in. So I'm going to keep that 2:3 ratio by using that drop down right there, and I'm gonna crop it considerably. Luckily, it was shot with a high resolution camera. So I'm going to put, this is Buffalo City Hall right here. So I'm going to put that right on one of the rule of thirds lines of intersection right there. As you can see, the overlay has the rule of thirds there. And let's see what that looks like. I'll hit apply. And I think that looks pretty good. So there's our crop. Now I'm just going to start processing it in the tone and color panel. And what I like to do for night shots is go to white balance right away. That's the section that says color right here. One little tip I could give you is when you process a night image, when you shoot a night image, maybe you may want to put your camera in tungsten mode. You could see how tungsten mode really kind of takes away some of the green that was in the shot. And you'll get a lot of green in night images when you're shooting like the Milky Way, stars, star trails. A lot of times the sky will come out green, and it just, of course, doesn't look natural. Just go to the white balance and put it in tungsten mode, and that will take care of that. So that helped a lot right off the bat. Now, I'm just going to process it like I normally would. I do have a kind of a philosophy of how I process my images, and I mentioned in the last video that I have a video where I talk about why I shoot and process the way I do. And a lot of people couldn't find that video. So in the description below this video, I'll have a link to that video so you could watch it and get an idea of why I process the way I do. So I tend to make it flat first. I don't mess with contrast yet, and I'll go to highlights and I'll bring those down. And highlights aren't going to do too much on night images, I found, especially when you have these street lights and things in it. The highlights slider usually doesn't do a lot. I'm going to leave midtones alone. I'm just going to open up shadows, so it's kind of flattening everything out a little bit. Then typically what I like to do is I like to go to contrast at this point before I do my white and black point. I really didn't do that in my last video, but I like doing that. And I like adding contrast with the curves panel. I prefer that over the contrast slider, and I mentioned why in that video. So we're going to put a point right in the middle. I'm going to go down here in the shadows area and pull down slightly and go up here in the highlights area and push up slightly. So there is a bit of contrast with the curves panel. So I'm going to jump back up to the tone and color panel, and I'm going to get a white and black point by holding in the J key, clicking on the whites slider and moving it to the right. And right away I started getting some red in the image right over here. And I know the computer is, when I first pressed the J key, it showed J down here, and I believe it probably went away. I am actually still holding in the J key, even though the software I used to record the screen stopped displaying that J key. So whites right at 0 or around 0 was fine. So we're going to do the blacks now, and I'm going to hold that J key again and hold it in and move this to the left until I get some blue starting to encroach in the image, and I am right in here. And I typically like to have the blacks clip a little, so I'm going to leave it right there. I'm not going to add any structure to the image here because I prefer to do that with dynamic contrast and or sharpening in the effects panel, and I don't want to pile on too much sharpening or structure onto the image. So I'm not going to do it here. Let's see with if I push haze to the left a little bit, just a tiny bit to the left with haze. I think kind of just helps clarify everything a little bit. And I'm pretty much done now with the tone and color and the curves panel. So there's before and there's after. Now it's not showing the crop. I cropped this image considerably, but it is showing how much I straightened it. And you can see how the color temperature is greatly affected by switching it to tungsten. So I'm done with that. I'm not going to do anything with the details panel. I prefer to do any sharpening or noise reduction in the effects module. And lens corrections, it found my lens. It was a Nikon 24-70. So we're good to go there. We're going to jump right over into the effects module. And I think that first filter I'm going to add is dynamic contrast. A lot of times I'm undecided whether to add sharpening or dynamic contrast. I rarely will add both. It's just the way I do it. Maybe you'd like to add both, but I'm going to try dynamic contrast. And right off the bat, the default settings of 0, 15, and 20 are really making the image pop. I really like what it did. There's before and there's after. Now a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just get rid of that, and when I'm undecided, and I'll come over here to sharpening and I'll see what sharpening does. And sharpening did a nice job as well, right with the default settings that uses this fixed focus. You can come in and try some more of the presets, see what they might do, or as we did in previous videos, come in and actually move the sliders yourself to try to get a setting you might like. I think I like dynamic contrast just off the bat a little better. But I am going to change these sliders slightly. I'm going to bring small contrast up to 10, and I'm going to bring large contrast down a little bit. Large dynamic contrast, I should say, down a bit. And I think I might bring medium down just a little bit too. That looks pretty good. I'm just doing it by eye. I'm not really doing any scientific method here. I'm just looking at it to see what I like. Now, another thing that often looks really nice with a night image, or maybe one of those blue twilight images, when you have streetlights in the shot or any type of pointed light source, is glow. This image, right off the bat, I'm not sure how it will look because the lights, the street lights, are very far away, and there's not really distinct pointed light sources. They're really all kind of melded together. You know, it's all street light. It works best, glow works best when you really have a distinct pointed light source. But let's try it. So I'm going to add a filter, and I'm going to go to glow. And I'll just try a preset to begin with. Normal, I don't like that. Lighter. See, it's not really doing it because there's really not a distinct pointed light source. But I wanted to bring this up just to give you an idea that you may want to try using glow, and it will just add a bit of glow. What you're going for is to add a bit of glow around that pointed light source. And so what you would probably do is bring halo down a bit, or bring amount down a bit, and bring halo up a little bit to kind of get that glow. I don't like what it's doing with this image, so we're going to get rid of it. Now, really, I think the image is pretty much done. I don't think there's another filter I'd like to go on there, except for maybe noise reduction. As I click on the image down here in the darker areas, you could see that there is a considerable amount of noise. It was ISO 400, but it was a pretty long exposure. I think I said 3 seconds. So it has quite a bit of noise in the image. So we're going to go to Add Filter, and we're going to go to Noise Reduction. Now, usually like strong, just that preset right there will do a pretty good job of kind of smoothing out, and it did, smoothing out the noise, and we didn't lose a ton of detail. But what I usually like to do is I usually like to mask it in some way. So I'm going to click the mask icon right here. And most of the noise in this image, pretty much all the noise, is in the darkest part of the image. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a luminosity mask. But as you know from our previous videos, the luminosity mask will allow the effect, whatever you're doing, in this case noise reduction, to affect or to work on or to do things to the brightest part of the image, and it won't affect the darker parts of the image. So when I add the luminosity mask, it's going to do the opposite of what I really want it to do. So I'm going to click luminosity, and we'll do a view of the mask, and you can see it's just really a black and white image. But what it's doing, what this mask is showing us, is this brighter part, and all the bright parts are getting the most noise reduction, and the dark parts are getting the least amount of noise reduction. So what we need to do is invert the mask, and there's a little button right here, invert. So we'll click on that, and you can see how it turns into a negative. So now what was light in the image is now dark, and what is dark in the image is now light. So those light parts are getting the noise reduction applied to it. So we're applying the noise reduction exactly where it needs to be applied for this shot. So that is done. I think the next thing we're going to add is a vignette, but because it's a night image and it's relatively dark to begin with, I just want to add a very subtle vignette. Not anything too heavy. There's before and there's after. Basically just darkening those edges just a little bit so a viewer of the image's eyes doesn't just stray out to the edge. It kind of gets pulled back in towards the middle a little bit. So as far as I'm concerned, I am done. So I'll just bring it back to the develop module. And sometimes after I process an image with some effects, I may come back into the develop module and readjust some tone and color adjustments. I don't think I need to here, but sometimes I do. There's before and there's after. So you can see it not a lot of processing, and it looks pretty good. Let's export it. We'll go down here in the lower right hand corner, click on that little export icon. And again, I'm going to resize it as we did in our previous video with the long edge being at 1080, a resolution of 72. We'll use the general on1 resize. Sharpening, after the last video, when I looked at the image that was exported after the video was done, I noticed it was a little bit too sharp. So screen medium was a bit too much. We'll just try screen low for this one. So we'll go with screen low. We're going to do a JPEG with quality at 100. And I'm going to put it on the desktop and not going to do anything after the export. And I'm going to rename it with text. And I'm going to call it Buffalo at Night. All right. And we're going to click export. Now I mentioned that the export function in On1 is slow. So I'm going to pause the video and it's going to take about a minute. And when it's done exporting, we'll come back and take a look at it. All right, that one actually exported much faster. I'd say that one took about 30 seconds. So we'll go over and it's on my desktop right here. And we resized it to 1080. So it is considerably smaller. And it looks much better with the low sharpening as opposed to, I believe we used medium last time. So looks pretty good. So that's how I go about processing a night image. And I wanted to say this at the beginning. I said it at the beginning of the last image. This isn't meant to be the only way you would process a night image, and this is the right way and every other way is the wrong way. This is just the way I do it. And hopefully, maybe I taught you something you didn't know about On1, something that On1 could do that you didn't know it could do. And you could then utilize that functionality in your post-processing when you process a night image. So that's it. Thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.